What's up, guys? My name's Simon, and I've been running for almost a decade now. Just crazy to say out loud. I'm a middle distance athlete here at the University of Findlay, and I've dabbled in a bit of cross country as well. I've run some pretty competitive times, but I've had a pretty unique path to get to where I've gotten, and a slightly unorthodox approach to training as well. And that's really why I wanted to make this video today, to share some of those things that I picked up and learned along the way. Especially for athletes out there who are struggling with injury, doubts, or questioning whether it's still worth it. Because trust me, I've been there many times. And I've battled a lot of injuries throughout my running career, specifically shin issues. Inflammation and stress fractures had defined a lot of my early seasons. And I remember back in eighth grade, driving back from the physical therapist with my mom, just crying in the car because they told me my season was over. And fast forward to my senior year of college, I'm crying after getting last at nationals. This sport is brutal in a lot of ways. It doesn't care how bad you want it. It doesn't care how hard you've worked. It doesn't owe you anything. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the sport. That's what makes us that's what makes it worth coming back to. People like you and me are drawn to that challenge, and we love the fact that it demands everything from you, and it doesn't let you fake it. In my opinion, it's one of the purest tests of the human mind and spirit. How far are you willing to be pushed mentally and physically? How much are you willing to sacrifice to find out what you're capable of? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself, and that's running. That's why we keep coming back even when it really sucks. um, you might be thinking, okay, shin splints, that's fixable, right? You just need some stronger calves, stronger hips, better shoes, better form, maybe higher cadence. I'm at the point where I've exhausted most of these avenues, and worked with many PTs and running performance specialists and whatnot. And I've come to the conclusion that running every day and at high volumes is just not something that I can do. It's just not something my body's built for. Once I accepted that and kind of realized I can't train like everybody else, and I actually accepted that fact, that's when the real growth happened for me. I'm sure I'm not alone in this experience. If I had to guess, you're probably watching this because you're dealing with something similar. You have an injury you just can't shake, or maybe you feel like you're going in circles, or you're doing all the right things, but you're just not getting the results you want. And I get it. I've been there. It's lonely. It's frustrating. Especially when you've built your identity around being a runner. It's no longer just a sport to you. It's like it's a part of who you are. And at a certain point, I realized my approach had to change. You know, I couldn't just survive the injuries anymore. I had to find a way to train in a sustainable way. What ended up making the biggest difference for me, and what I don't think people talk about enough, is that you do not have to train like everybody else. I mentioned that earlier, but you don't have to be the guy running 90, 100-mile weeks. You have to find what works for you and your body. And for me, that meant cross training, a lot of it, specifically the arc trainer. You might have heard of some talented runners like Parker Valby or Elliot Giles of the UK, who have had really successful careers, and contributed their success to cross training. And a big part of that success comes from the arc trainer. This machine allows you to have a really high knee drive and also get your heart rate up really easily. And in my opinion, translates to running better than any other form of cross training. And over the past 2 years, I've run no more than 20, 25 miles a week, just on the workout days, and everything else I would substitute for arc training. What this has done is it's allowed me to, most importantly, be healthy and have consistency within my seasons. And also it's allowed me to put up pretty competitive times from all the way from the 800 to the 10K. So it's really versatile. It's a really versatile tool, and in my opinion, I might receive some backlash for this, but it might actually be better at building aerobic capacity because it is such limited risk of injury. You can actually go harder on your off days. You can push harder, get your heart rate higher, and still recover just as well as you would on an easy run. Obviously, not everybody has access to one of these machines. So I've adjusted my training in other ways, including incline treadmill. That's been a big one. Just substituting some of my runs and workouts and just running on an incline, especially when my legs are feeling extra beat up. This allows you to, you can get really quality work in without having to pound your legs or run as fast because you're fighting gravity. You know, and obviously you also have your ellipticals, your biking, your swimming, your aqua jogging. These are things that I just sprinkle into my training just to switch things up sometimes. But obviously you can still get really quality work doing these types of activities. And the important thing that this did for me was give me a foundation that I could build off of. So I'm going to try to put a link in the description with a sample week of what I did last cross country season, so you can get kind of a better idea of what I'm talking about and how you can implement it into your normal training. Beyond embracing cross training, you know, another huge thing for me was just taking ownership over my training. And you know, this sounds like a simple thing, but it can be more challenging than you might think, because it's really easy to show up to practice just kind of in cruise control. You know, you're just going through the motions. But I think when you start to approach your workouts, your easy runs, your drills, your lifts, when you approach them with a level of intention, you start to get so much more out of it. And I think one of the best ways that we can do this is just by documentation. Like whether it's a notebook, an Excel sheet, a calendar, whatever it is, write down your training, write down where you've been and where you want to go. And you know, I think at a certain point you have to become a student of the sport to take things to the next level. And you know, the more data and information that you can keep track of and write down, the better you're going to be in tune with your body and the progress you're making. That's important because consistency is the most important thing in this sport. You have to be able to start stacking weeks, months, and years if you want to see real progress. You know, write down your mileage, your paces, your distance, but also keep track of, you know, how you feel physically or mentally. You know, if you're cross training, keep track of your RPMs, your resistance levels, your heart rate. That way, you're not just going in each day mindlessly, you know, spinning your wheels. You're making consistent progress, and you know what kind of levels you need to be hitting that day, where you need to be at to in order to get better. Um, and you know, I've always trained hard, but I saw the biggest difference when I started training smart and hard at the same time. And maybe the most important thing that I want to end this video with is to just have patience. Um, you know, your progress is not going to be linear. You're still going to have bad days, bad weeks, unexpected injuries. There's going to be times where you feel like you're moving backwards, but that's just part of the deal. You got to keep showing up. You got to keep finding ways to get better. You know, one day you're going to show up to a race and you're going to cross that finish line and you're going to surprise yourself, and it's going to be really awesome. But you know, the most important thing here is that you can look back on your journey, and, you know, be proud of your efforts, be proud of what you did, you know, despite the times or the results. That's all I really have for this one. You know, don't hesitate to comment or reach out. You know, my goal for this was to just help or inspire at least one person. So let me know if I did that. Thanks for